This is the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching and publishing services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Kris Morwood, author of Hannah Hemp. Kris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
All right, you ready to get started?
I am.
All right, let's begin. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
So, probably the best piece of advice I can give is don't give up. Give yourself time. It's a long process sometimes. Because I am the co-author of children's books, we tend to have the process where we have to find the illustrator and write the timeline out and the outline and then formulate it back and forth. So we go off of a lot of illustrations. And sometimes the process takes 6 months, sometimes it takes longer. So I would say persevere and don't give up.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. I know with the children's books, I think illustrations are probably one of the most challenging things to get done. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, it's challenging because authors have an idea in their mind of what they want the book to look like, and then the illustrator obviously is the artist and has an image in their mind, and we have to meet in the middle. And so creating characters and developing those characters in a book, it's different when it contains illustration versus just straight, text or words. So it has been great, though, because there are some really talented artists out there, and we're lucky to be able to work with them.
Now, do you have any recommendations on artists for the aspiring children's authors that we have listening to the show? What's the best way for them to find a potential illustrator for their books?
Probably the best way to find a potential author, and I'm sorry, it's about to get really loud in here. I'm going to see if I can move to a little bit quieter place. The best way we found was just to look on artist websites. I also went to a lot of the different artist schools that were around the area and talked to some of the professors and teachers, because I also want to give young up-and-coming artists a break in this and the ability to get into something different than the medium that they might be working in.
And do you have any artist websites or illustrator sites that you would recommend to our audience?
I do, but I don't have them. I have them in a list, and I'm happy to email anybody that the resources that I've used. But the list is pretty long and extensive, and it might take longer than this.
That's fine. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Let me ask you this. What do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Well, the hardest part for us was that the subject that we are writing about is technically federally illegal. So trying to write children's books regarding cannabis and hemp were challenging from the get-go. So the biggest challenge was finding a publisher, and after going through the entire process, we determined that we were just going to go ahead and self-publish. So we did our research. We looked around at different ways to self-publish, and actually it gave us a lot more control of the book. So I would say if you have, a touchy subject matter that you're working on, self-publishing might be the way to go.
Well, and I thank you for sharing that. That was one of the other reasons I wanted to have you on the show, because obviously your book is in a very unique area, and I really appreciate you giving us the perspective on that, because depending on the book you have and what you're talking about, it can definitely be a challenge.
It can, but it's also something that is very timely and necessary. Now that cannabis has been legalized, in over 30 states medically, and 9 for adult use, we feel since it's going to be a part of society, it's best to be honest with children and talk to them of things that we feel, has been miseducated the uh, the various sources, the Just Say No's, and the DARE programs. And so we're hoping that in this next generation that's coming up, that they'll understand it's an adult usage and the reasons for that.
Now, for our next question, I'd like for you to please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that you felt worked well.
Marketing strategy. So I told you that you'd probably be fairly disappointed in our marketing strategy. We came up with our first book, Cali Cannabis, in 2014, right after legalization here in Colorado. We were the first state to go legal in the nation. And so we felt it was time to, educate not just people in Colorado, but other people. And we researched the project and found that there was nobody that was actually out there, writing on this subject from an educational perspective. And so we attended a lot of events. We kind of stalked libraries, and we went to many, many business. I traveled and was working in standards development for the cannabis industry at the time. So I was going to numerous conferences across the nation and had the opportunity to showcase the book there. And that was kind of our first endeavor into publishing. We learned a tremendous amount. And so then we expanded it, our next book, Hana Hemp, because the hemp and cannabis industry vary in many, many different ways. The one thing that is very challenging, in addition to publishing, is you are not allowed to advertise in the cannabis industry. And so we walk a very fine line, and many, many, advertising, companies won't even look at you because you're advertising a product that is still federally illegal.
Got you. So the conference strategy definitely helped.
The conference strategy is probably the best because people aren't, sometimes aware. We tried to, target dispensaries, but most dispensaries don't carry a tremendous amount of ancillary products. And, you can also go to the shops where they carry, the pipes and the hookahs and things like that. And those places, again, they're not equipped, they're more equipped to handle the greeting cards. And so we felt education was the best route. So we showcased our books at conferences like Marijuana for Medical Professionals happening here in October. Cannabis Nurses Network will also produce events, and I produced the Cannabis Nurses Network conference last year in Las Vegas. This year it's going to be held in San Diego in February. And then we'll also be showcasing it in Jamaica, Jamaica. So sticking with the more cannabis-related events. But I've also found a great deal of interest because we have our third book that's coming out, and we're expanding the demographics of our population. And so we're going to be traveling quite a bit to states that are legal medically and contain an older geriatric population that's relearning about cannabis. And so places like Florida and other states that have been in an illegal status up until this year. So we think we're going to stick with mostly educational conferences.
Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Well, I would say, and I really had to think about this because I have had so many books over the years that I have loved. But actually, I was thinking back, and the very first chapter book that I read was A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And it's a pretty harsh story when you're reading it as a young reader because this, child has a lot of adversity in her life. And reading is such a great way. It was the first time I really felt like I could be transported by something. And over the years, I still kind of come back to that book. A lot of people come back to, their favorites from high school and things that, that they were required reading, but because it was a voluntary exercise and it was something that I got such great pleasure out of, it made me a lifelong reader. So I would say that is probably my favorite book, and the reason is because the main character, overcame her circumstances and persevered. And that's pretty much a lesson for us throughout our whole lives.
Well, for someone who had to think about that book, you gave a great answer. That was outstanding.
Thank you.
So let's talk about your favorite quote. So what is your favorite quote and why?
Well, I am a huge fan of Eleanor Roosevelt. I have most of her quotes are my favorites, and I quote them all the time. But I think probably the one that resonates most with me, especially working in this industry, is probably a woman is like a tea bag. You can't tell how strong she is until she's in hot water. And that's kind of very appropriate to what's going on in the cannabis industry right now, and with the current, governmental regulations and rules and administrative enforcement. And so you have to adapt, you have to change, and had I known that it would be so challenging to write a children's book about this plant, I might have rethought it, but it's taught me so much along the way. And, it can go against some pretty big adversaries when you're writing about controversial subjects. It can put you in a negative light. My background is nonprofit management, and I spent 25 years building my reputation as an executive director, development director for, some large nonprofits. And, people judge you whether they know your story or not. So I feel that this is really the right time to be in this industry. I feel it's really the right time to put out a message out there to people that we all have to stand up for what we believe in. And even if we're being told that our opinion and our beliefs are wrong, and especially in this political climate, we really have to stay strong to our beliefs. And so, we might get ourselves in hot water every once in a while, but that brings out our strength. And so I think challenges and adversity really shape us as individuals.
Well, Kris, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
The best way to find us online is tallyandfriends.com, and that is our website. And we also have our books available on Amazon and FoodSpace, and so you can do digital downloads. We also ship directly, so we can get you hooked up if you'd like to reach us at tallyandfriends.com.
Well, Kris, I want to thank you again for being a guest on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.